Hello and welcome to the weekly vmcampos Comic Book Club. I'm your host, vmcampos. This is the podcast where I review a comic book, new or old, from my collection, and rate it on the following factors: the cover art, interior art, plot, and enjoyability of the book on a scale of 1 to 5. And I tell you if you should buy the book or not. This week I'm reading Year Zero, Number 1, published by American Writers and Artisans in 2020. If you'd like to support the show, head on over to patreon.com/vmcampos. So let's start off with a little bit of background information as usual. This episode is for June 3rd, which means that comics have been hitting the shelves again for a very short time. Hashtag back the comeback. So I was able to get my comic haul from my local Comics and Stuff in San Diego. There were a lot of books that I was missing during the stay-at-home orders here in San Diego. I also took a chance to pick up issue number 1 of several series just to get on the ground floor of them, and one of them was Year Zero. Now, I had been aware of this comic from the Previews World website several months ago when it was first solicited, but I've finally gotten my hands on issue number 1. If you also want to know about comics that are coming up, don't forget to check out my YouTube series, The Top Comic Book Picks with VM Campos, where I talk about the comic books that are coming up in the near future that you need to know about. So I took my own advice, and I picked up this book. It's basically a zombie comic book. We'll get into the details of it, of course. And it's by a publisher, American Writers and Artisans, who, as of this podcast, is a pretty new publisher. They've got some big names behind them, such as Alex Alonso, Spencer Bateman, Chris Burns, Bill Gemas, Ileana Jimenez, Amy Kim, and more. They have a creative council which includes J. Michael Straczynski, Reginald Hudlin, Garth Ennis, Greg Hurwitz, Margaret Stoll, and Frank Cho. So if you're interested in a new world of comics, a new publisher, a new set of stories from some big names, AWA Studios seems to be firing on all cylinders. The comic in question is Year Zero. It's a 5-issue limited series with a creative team of Benjamin Percy, Ramon Rosanas, and Lee Loffridge. As I said, it's a zombie story, but told on a global scale. So if you've been jonesing for more zombie stories after the abrupt end of The Walking Dead, here's a new comic for you to check out. Let's get on with the review. Cover art. I got the second variant cover. This is a wraparound cover by Mike Deodato Jr. It shows a horde of zombies coming at one of the main characters, Saga Watanabe. He's trying to fend them off with his sword. Plus, we've also got the other main characters in the scene. It's just a huge zombie horde coming at all of our heroes, all of our main characters, in these beautiful tones, these dark, grimy tones with some flashes of red and yellow from the guns, from the blood. The zombies are sickly green tones, brown tones, red tones. There's a beautiful sense of direction and motion in the cover. All of the zombies are rushing towards Watanabe, so there's that sense of direction in the art. The logo, Year Zero, is yellow and red with the letter Z, or Z, in red. The rest of the words are distressed. They look like stencils or stenciling on equipment that's being kind of damaged. So I like that it's yellow and red. It really stands out with the rest of the muted colors. I like it. I like this cover a lot. I'll give it a 5 out of 5. It's got some great art by Deodato. I like that it's a wraparound cover. I'm a sucker for gimmicks. And it just feels epic. One minor quibble is that on the front side of the cover, it would have been nice to remove one of the zombies that's sort of falling out of the frame. You see the rest of the zombie on the back cover, because it's a wraparound cover, of course, so if you open up the book completely, lay it flat, you will get the full sense of it that the zombie is falling to the left. Well, I think that when you have it bagged and boarded, that zombie looks a little awkward, falling out of the frame that way, looks a little comedic, but that's just me being nitpicky. As I said, it's a 5 out of 5. Interior art is by Ramon Rosanas, artist, Lee Loffridge, colorist, and Sal Cipriano, letterer. The interior art is very good as well. It's realistic, it's got good shading, great use of color. As we meet each character, there is a distinct color palette for each of them. When we meet Sarah Lemons, it's all in cool blue tones because it's happening in a polar research station. When we meet Danielle Martinez in Mexico City, there's wonderful purple tones throughout. In Tokyo, we meet Saga Watanabe. In here we have some greens and browns throughout. Meeting Fatima Shah in Kabul shows us desert tones, yellows and browns. And BJ Hoole in Burnsville, Minnesota, he's in a lot of yellows. So I appreciated that a lot. The coloring is great. Each character has their own sort of leitmotif, but in color. The anatomy is realistic. The scenery is realistic. I like how there are several shots of there's something not quite right, moving on. But then we get back to that a little bit later throughout the story. There's little flashes of, hey, what's that? Why is that bus going down the street out of control? Why is there blood in that room the maid is about to clean? What are people yelling in that language I don't understand? Panel layout is excellent. There are wide scenes to get a sense of everything in that particular locale. There are close-ups to make a point of things. There's a really mean bully kid that we get some good close-ups of to really establish his character. There's a shot at the Polar Research Station that's really interesting, pulling something out of the ice. When we get a shot of a city burning, it's really affecting. And when we get the close-ups of people, we can really read their expressions. So the interior art is also a 5 out of 5. This was written by Benjamin Percy. He does a good job of introducing each of the characters that will be part of this ensemble global story. We meet Sarah Lemons, a scientist at a polar research station. Her part takes place 1 year ago, prior to the rest of the story. We meet Daniel Martinez in the now in Mexico City. He's a homeless child that's living through Dia de los Muertos, and again the aforementioned bully. We have Saga Watanabe, a hitman in Tokyo who's about to do his hit against some CEO or something. Fatima Shah in Kabul is making contact with some American troops to help some battered women. And BJ Hoole is a doomsday prepper in Minnesota in his underground bunker. We get slices of their lives and then little glimpses of what's happening with this zombie pandemic. BJ seems to be the one that's the most prepared for it all. He's got a map of all of the outbreak sites and everything. Daniel in Mexico City is just living his life, not really paying attention to the world. And the teaser at the very beginning at the Polar Research Station with Sarah is very intriguing. So I think the story is another 5 out of 5. It's a really good starting point that will hopefully lead to an interesting story in 5 issues. But I do wonder how much can be told in those 5 issues. Are we used to The Walking Dead with over 190 issues where they can tell a really long story? Sometimes a little too long. Is 5 issues going to be enough to set up this story, have the middle chapter and a conclusion? Is this perhaps a tryout series where it could go into a more of an ongoing story? That might be interesting. As for what we see so far, I'm on board. Lastly, the enjoyability of the book. I'm going to give this a 4.5 out of 5 because I wish it was longer. I wish we had more that we could see in this first issue. It's a standard length comic book, American comic book, and it does a good job of introducing all the characters, like I said, showing their environment and what their life is like. But I can't wait for issue number 2. And knowing that it's going to be 5 issues in total leaves me wanting more already. So I did enjoy the book, I did enjoy the art, the story, everything about it, but I just wish it was longer. It might be cool to explore, double-sized first issues in this new universe of comics at AWA. I think that would be a great way to really hook people on a new comic company. Maybe not even double length, maybe just an extra 6 pages or so. I'm not privy to the economics of it all, but I think at a reasonable price with a few extra pages for issue number 1 would be a great way to entice people to check out your new comic company. Not just all the great names behind the company, but the actual content. In conclusion, the book is definitely a buy. Buy the book if you are interested in a new zombie story, if you're interested in the people that live within the horror, their individual stories, their points of view. Buy it if you like good art, and if you want to get in on the ground floor of an issue number 1. So if you enjoyed the podcast, consider heading over to my Patreon, patreon.com/vmcampos. Simply follow for free to be alerted to everything that I do about comic books, San Diego Comic-Con, cosplay, Magic the Gathering, etc. At the $1 tier, you'll be helping the podcast stay funded and keep it going. At the $2 tier, I will mail you some comic books in appreciation. In any event, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, share, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. So this week I read Year Zero, Number 1, published by American Writers and Artisans in 2020. This has been the weekly VM Campos Comic Book Club, and I'll see you next week.